Hello, welcome to my channel, Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg. Today I want to talk a little bit about my love for audiobooks. I have mentioned audiobooks on my channel before. I have probably even made short videos, short descriptions about why I love audiobooks. But I saw a video by Brian at Bookish last week talking about his issue with audiobooks. Now, I'm not going to go over his points, point by point. He does like audiobooks and does listen to them, but he has some issues with them where it sort of sounds like they're not quite as good as reading a regular book, about picking up the book and physically reading it. I have a slightly different take. Now, let me go back in time and say how I got to the point where I started listening to audiobooks. Back when I was a young man in my 20s, I had a job at this place called Crown Books. And Crown Books is a now defunct discount bookseller. And I made friends with the manager of the store. And the manager eventually went on to be a buyer at the corporate headquarters. And eventually, he called me and said, "Can you help me move? I got lots of books, and I need help moving. And I'll give you some books as payment." Because as a book buyer, he got lots of sample books from book dealers. And I could take those sample books to the Crown bookstores and exchange them for any book that I wanted. So really, he just piled up a box full of books. Didn't matter what they were because didn't matter. I would exchange them for credit at the store. But one of the books that he gave me was the unabridged cassette recording of 1984 by George Orwell, narrated by Timothy West. Well, one of the rules of exchanging at Crown is Crown had to actually carry the book, or in this case, the audiobook, and they did not carry that book. So I could have taken it to a used bookstore and gotten, maybe a buck or two in credit. But for whatever reason, I put that in my car, my cassette player, and started listening to it. And ever since then, I have been completely hooked on audiobooks. Now, part of it was back in the days, this was 1997. The car I was driving was like a Ford Escort. It had a cassette player and a radio. And I had to commute to work. Now, my musical preferences at the time was classical music. And I'm just going to say, I don't want to get a huge argument here, but listening to classical music in a car during a commute isn't really the best way to listen to music. So I had these long, rather drawn out and unpleasant commutes. But the audiobook made that commute one of the highlights of my day. I could put in the cassette tape and listen to all the books that I wanted to. Now, when I first started, my rule of thumb was I'm only going to listen to books that I've read before. That lasted about 4 books. And then I started dipping into new books. And again, I have never looked back. And over the years, cars advanced. I bought a new car. It had an audio jack. And one of the things is I was driving a colleague to work one day because his car was in the shop. And he pointed out this audio jack to me, which I had never paid any attention to. He says, "You can plug in an iPad or an iPod to that." And iPods were just becoming a thing back then. And I said, "Oh, I guess you can." Because at that time, I had upgraded to a Subaru Forester. It had a CD player and a cassette player. And actually, I had to upgrade because the car that I originally bought only had the CD player. And the library had mostly cassette tapes on audiobook. So I had to make sure I had a cassette player. But then all of a sudden, this hit me. There's this place called Audible on the internet. And I can download all those books to an iPod, plug it into my audio jack. And that was history. life-changing reading experience to have all these audiobooks at the tip of my fingers on an iPod. All of a sudden, I was not limited to listening to audiobooks in a car. Oh yeah, I guess I could have gotten a Walkman and taken the cassettes out of my car and listened to it inside the home, but I never did that. But the iPod changed the way I listen to audiobooks. And now it's, of course, an iPhone instead of an iPod, but I just put in my headphones or my earbuds and I can listen to my audiobook wherever I want to. I can listen to it while I'm going for a walk. I can listen to it while I'm doing the dishes. Anywhere I want to listen to an audiobook, I'm now able to do. Again, very freeing. Now, some people are going to say that the audiobook experience is not quite up to snuff to the reading experience. The most common thing would say, well, you're multitasking, you're driving while listening, you're going to miss things. While I can't say that is untrue, the thing is, you can also miss things while reading a physical book. Have you not ever picked up a physical book, started reading, and then all of a sudden realized that a page or two have gone by and you haven't understood a thing? It's just your mind is physically reading, or your eyes are physically reading, but the words are not sticking in your brain. And you turn back a few pages and to where you remember reading and you start over. That can happen in a physical book. And yes, it can happen as an audiobook as well. So I really don't buy that as an excuse why an audiobook is a lesser experience than the physical book. You can easily miss things. Now, will you miss more things on audio than on physical? Perhaps. Is that going to change your experience in the long run? I don't think so. There are some people, again, who want to make sure that they gather every kernel and nut hidden in the text of a book. And those people, okay, if you're like that, maybe the audiobook isn't for you, but for me, I'm okay. I get 95% of an audiobook when I'm listening to it. Another issue that people bring up is that you can't annotate an audiobook the way you can a physical book. And that's sort of true. That if you're listening to an audiobook, you would have to hit pause and pull out a separate notebook and write down your thoughts about what you just heard. Where some people, if they're reading the book, just pull out their pen and scribble their thoughts on the page. Well, that might work for some people. First of all, I'm not an annotator. I would never physically write in a book under any circumstances. But that's just me. A lot of people are just fine writing in a book. And if you're listening to the audio version, you're going to have a notebook nearby or something on your iPhone or an iPad where you can take notes, if that's important to you. For me, taking notes is not important at all. A couple of people claim that the narrator is interpreting the text for you, that the voice that the narrator has, how they inflect a character's voice, can influence your understanding of the book. And to that is, again, yes, that can be the case. But it's also the case that I'm smart enough to know that that's just an interpretation. When a narrator is giving a character a certain accent or a certain flavor in the voice, you can hear that and go, okay, that's just the narrator. It's no different really than if you're in a book club and you're listening to someone talk about the book and they say, I think this character is this or character that. It's just a way. Now, Maybe some people will be more highly influenced by that narrator's voice and interpretation, and maybe audiobooks are not for them. But for me, it's fine. And sometimes a narrator actually really gets into the character and just nails it. The two examples I give are the books True Grit by Charles Portis, narrated by Donna Tartt. She is the author of The Secret History and The Goldfinch. She is not known to be an audiobook narrator, but in the introduction, or is it the afterword, she mentions how True Grit was a very important book to her growing up. And she absolutely nails the character of Maddie. It just highlights the book intensely. Another book with a really great narration is A Rage in Harlem by Chester Himes, narrated by Samuel L. Jackson. Now, Samuel L. Jackson is a very well-known actor. He is really not known for narrating audiobooks. But here's his narration of that is absolutely pitch perfect. He captures that inflection of Harlem in the 40s in the way that a middle-aged white man just reading the book would totally miss. So in those cases, I think the narrator actually enhances the audiobook. So also, when people complain about narrators influencing their interpretation of a book, how many of those people watch film adaptations of a book? That they will go see the movie and then pick up the book. Well, that film is going to be influencing your interpretation of the book if you watch the film first, because they will have a character, an actress portraying a character, and your mind will automatically insert that image onto the text. So that's, in my opinion, even a worse form of influence. Now, you can overlook that. You don't have to envision the actor's face on a character in a book. You can shut off your mind, at least in part, in the way that I shut off narrators influencing the text. And how do they work? Which works better, fiction or nonfiction? I am getting to really like nonfiction audiobooks. I think they work really well. There is less narrator intermingling, even though that's really not a problem for me. Now, the one problem with nonfiction is some nonfiction has pictures or maps, which you will not get in the audio version. You just do without it. I don't really find that I miss the photos in nonfiction. If I'm listening to an audiobook for the BookTube prize, I do try to check out the physical book from the library just to look over what I could have possibly missed in a photo. There never has been anything. On a rare occasion, there will be books that just cannot be translated into audio. The one that comes to mind first and foremost is House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. Now, if you know that book, you know a lot of that is the layout of the text, which you just cannot reproduce in audio. So in that case, yeah, that book will never work in audio. But it's still, for me, for most books, working just fine. Now, there are some people who say they can just not concentrate when they're listening to an audiobook. Their mind wanders, and it's just not an experience. They're getting very little of the text flowing into their brain. And for that, I say it's all a matter of training. You train your mind to listen to a voice and the words the voice is speaking, and treat that just the same as if you're reading the book. Again, it's just a matter of training. You do not go out and run a marathon on day one. You build yourself up to running a marathon. Some people are going to have to build themselves up to reading full books on audio. Maybe she'll start with a short story. And that's enough on audiobooks. I truly love audiobooks. I think it is just important as my physical books and my digital books. And I do not consider an audiobook a lesser experience than physically reading it. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading or listening.